Hey everybody, this is Perch. This is a reaction video to something that Zach put out saying that Las Vegas was clean and nice. You only saw 4 homeless people. Bullshit. You weren't looking. No, I'm kidding. Vegas has gotten a lot nicer. It went through a transition of being seedy. There was the whole "what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas," and then they said, we should get families in here because they've got cash, and that didn't quite work. So then they actually pivoted back to "come fuck everyone, Vegas." And then they kind of went, they kind of straddled that line for a while. This would be the 2005, 2006, 2007, where they were a little bit more. The people appeared on the strip in greater quantity with the stripper cards. You know it. If you've been there, you know what I mean. And then it tried to be family friendly again. At some point, somebody was like, "Hey, you know what? Let's make it rich." And so I'm not disputing his point. It really became a let's go for an upscale clientele. Let's let's invest in the Cosmo and the Aria and the Wynn and hotels like that. The Aria is beautiful, by the way. I love that hotel. That is my favorite on the strip. But you got kind of that. It's like, hey, we'll still have cheap places to eat. You can go to Circus. I guess that's gone now. You can go to or maybe, I don't know. You can go to New York. You can go to Excalibur, kind of the Luxor, which the piece of shit hotels. But and you could eat cheap there, or you could go to the Wynn and you could basically spend $200 a plate. And we got both, but they definitely put the marketing in for the younger crowd. As a result, shows came in, more high end stuff. They leaned harder into Cirque du Soleil. All that's fine. So just Vegas is fine, but if you walk from say Treasure Island, which is also like borderline piece of shit, up to the Bellagio, you will pass 50 homeless people. I'm sorry if you didn't. I don't know. Somebody had just come through with a hose and squirt them out of there. But yeah, there's homeless people there for sure. Anywho, the actual thing I wanted to talk about was comics. And there's this debate. I've had it on this show. Others have had it. I think it was in the video talking about Vegas, about comics. What happened for a long time. I think in the 70s and the 80s, comic books were, arguably for some collectors, some kids. There was definitely a kids line that morphed into a more adult line. But what was produced for kids was just different at the time. Yes, you had Alf and you had books like that. But you also had, you would have things like Transformers and G.I. Joe, which are arguably comics for kids because they're based on toys. Except, they weren't for kids because people were getting straight up murdered in that thing. And so, it's not fair to say that, Marvel and DC had just a bunch of kids comics, because if you look at G.I. Joe, you look at books like that. You look at The Warlord, for example. These are books that in theory were for children, but you'd have murder, you'd have other things. I mean, believe it or not, once upon a time, Conan was sold for kids, and then you have boobs just flying around in that book. It was, we were more comfortable showing kids stuff. I remember, I'm a kid during the 80s, and I'm watching kind of Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, and there were frequently boobs in that, but certainly a lot of bullets flying everywhere, blood, and I think every now and then I'll put on one of those films, and my 14 and 11-year-old daughter is sitting there, and my wife's like, "What the fuck are you doing? No, don't put that on there." And it's like, Schwarzenegger is out there just murdering people. I'm like, no, this is what I watched as a kid. I used to watch Predator, The Exorcist, like all kinds of films. Like, this is just what you did. I mean, yeah, we're raising a softer generation, I guess is my point. Anyway, but comics, they had that, I felt there was a pretty good balance. They're putting out stuff for adults, stuff for kids, stuff for everything in between, stuff for collectors. You had events, you have indie comics. You had a really healthy mix from the big two of what they were putting out. And you had a really healthy indie scene with things like Zot and Nexus and a lot. I mean, I don't know why I'm picking those two, Zot and Nexus. Could you get two more different creators, by the way, on those two? But you had a variety of indie books. I guess that's my point. And then somewhere along the line, we went through the 90s, went through bankruptcy, and everything else. We had the image revolution, we had style over substance, and you had books that were super late. And then you had some licensed stuff that was, popular. You had, Danger Girl, where just you had tits falling out everywhere. And then you had a kind of just the excess of extreme kind of stuff within Marvel and DC. And then you wandered into 2000s, and it's probably worth a video in and of itself. But things like Marvel Knights, I should make my point to you because I would say 90% of you will disagree with what I'm about to say. I didn't like Marvel Knights, and I think Marvel Knights actually did some harm to Marvel as a whole. Which I know it's a crazy take, but I'll promise I'll come back to it another time. But what happened was, and the speculation was sometime around 2014, 2015, Marvel hired a bunch of, non-binary trans people who shoved identity politics into everything else. And, it was really a result of they hated their audience. They hated the fact that comic readers were, in many cases, conservative, because a lot of them were. They hated the fact that their audience was older. Older, by the way, and affluent tends to equal conservative in many cases. And so, you had a bunch of Democrats come into comics and wanted to produce books for Democrats and just hated going to conventions and seeing that there were, people who would vote for Bush, buying the comics. And so as a result, they pivoted hard to get a new audience. I don't necessarily believe that's true. It's a convenient story, and I get why people would think that, but I think the truth is actually, a little dumber than that. Comics in the, 2010 or so, were still, I mean, if you talk to people who are in the industry, there was still a lot of rebelling against people like, Mark Miller, even to some extent, people like Bendis, although I think Bendis read the tea leaves really well. And they didn't like the creators becoming superstars larger than the company. They didn't like the fact that, comics were sold on the name of the creator, and they didn't, they didn't own the creator like they owned Spider-Man. And so there was this desire to kind of bring in newer / cheaper talent. Simultaneously, editors are coming in making a lot less, and so you're getting people who are, I've used this example before, in it for the love of the hobby, but not in it for the paycheck. And while it sounds good in theory, you get somebody who's passionate about comics. You also get people who, are living with their parents or can't afford things, or, has a roommate at the age of 30, or, just financially not doing great. And then you turn them loose and kind of shepherding comics. And I've mentioned this before, but I believe it's fully true. People assign value to what they pay for. And if you have people and you're paying them minimum wage to edit comics, well, then you will get minimum wage level of work. You'll get people who are not really invested in making those comics great because you're paying them sub McDonald's wages. And so, what you need in many cases, and I've known editors like this, I've met editors like this, there still are editors like this. People who are like, I'm editing this story on Obsidian from DC. It's a lesser known character, and in it, the writer is trying to say that, Obsidian never had a pet when he was a child, but I'm not sure if that's true. Can we go to the archives and look through all the comics, search up Wikipedia? Does anybody have a panel of a flashback where we learned that Obsidian did have a dog when he was younger? Like, you would have people who actually struggle to maintain continuity and look for those details, even though arguably they didn't really matter. You also had people who are like, they're paying me $12 an hour, so fuck it. Who cares? Like, give him 50 dogs. I don't know, to read. Like, why should I care? Nobody's gonna read this anyway. I think the challenge you have with comics, and a lot of people involved on it, are, people who are, they're not being paid much. They're very aware that the subscription numbers are low, that the people who are buying the comics, are not 150,000, but are, 5,000 or 10,000. And so when confronted with just the lack of economics in comics, people just kind of do whatever they want. So you get a lower, priced group of people doing it. You get a, you get a lack of quality control at the editorial level. And then you start to get people who are like, and this is always the thing that I cringe when I'm at, a BarCon or I'm at some party or after event with comic writers. And invariably, and I've had this happen dozens of times, somebody will say the words, wouldn't it be funny if, or wouldn't it be wild if? And whatever follows that sentence is usually some of the dumbest shit you can imagine in comics. Almost always. It's stuff like, well, wouldn't it be funny if, Wolverine had a handlebar mustache at some point in the 1800s and we wrote a story about how he had a handlebar mustache and people called him, chum? Well, how could we, can we write a story around that? I'm not even joking, by the way. This is the kind of stuff that goes on. And all of that is kind of the, I want to entertain myself dumb humor that exists when there are no stakes in comics. And if you're paying people substandard wages, there are no stakes in comics. And so I think it's convenient and I think it makes for good YouTube videos and, it certainly riles up Republicans say, these comic writers, they hate you because you're a Trump person or you're a Bush person or whatever, because you're a McCain. Well, probably not that one, but you're a Republican. I'm not gonna lie that again, you get low paid talent and you get people who are also don't give two fucks about life or what's going on. These people will go onto Twitter and be like, screw your politics. But they're about as invested and knowledgeable on the subject as, as one of those homeless guys that live in Vegas. They don't care. They care about riling you, a customer, up. But that's not indicative of this big Democrat liberal plot. It has a lot more to do with money, or rather the lack of it. With no money comes no responsibility. And so when you're in that world, you're getting what you pay for. You have a car, you need to go get it serviced. Are you going to, your dealership and getting gouged? Or are you going to a local mechanic that you've known for 20 years and he'll charge you, but it will be fair and you have some trust there built up? Or do you go to the Safeway parking lot and say, hey, who knows how to open up the who knows how to open up the hood? And who wants to take this wrench and just start fucking around in my car? That's what comics sometimes are like. Now, yeah, there's, like I said before, there are absolutely editors who do care, who will go to the ends of the earth to find out if Obsidian had a dog. You have writers who are like, you know what? I may be only promised 3 issues, but I'm going to write like I'm getting 50 issues and I'm going to put some time into it and really try and make a commercial success. You definitely have those people. They're out there. But when the money really dropped out of comics, we were left with this hollowed out shell of where we're at. And it's not healthy. And so the biggest, to me, indicator, I've had countless conversations. I truly believe it. The biggest reason why comics pivoted after 2010 is a combination of the publishers stopped wanting big name creator talent that they couldn't control. They started paying less. They started enforcing more price cuts. They really trimmed down with the full-time staff, i.e. the editors. They started giving editors more books than they could handle, which, you're paid less and now you've got more than you can deal with. So you give even fewer fucks. And this is the result. And so as a result, you get people in who are like, wouldn't it be funny if everyone was trans? All right, sure. Yeah, that'd be funny. I mean, if you don't care, you don't care. I have a friend who will rent cars and he'll rent cars on, for the company. And he's putting them on the company card. And in it, he discovered that he's not assigned to the car, meaning the car is rented by the company, not him as an individual. He still has shows license and everything, but he gets in his head, hey, I don't have to take care of this car because it's not my car. I don't have to live with it. So this guy will drive 80 miles an hour over speed bumps and just trash it because it's like, well, nobody's going to know. So fuck it. And I don't have to treat this car with respect. I can, slam the doors. Who cares? It's not mine. The guy actually got fired because he just fucked up some cars and then wouldn't pay for it. So anyway, yeah, the things happen. Fuck around and find out, right? But that's a little bit of comics. Look, if you don't care, if you're being paid, sub-zero wages, these aren't your characters. You're writing Spider-Man. Um, you know, yeah, make him trans. Have Mary Jane date Paul. Like who cares? It's not mine. Is that a terrible attitude? Hell yes, it is a terrible attitude. Is it do you see that in comics? Yes. I'm not gonna lie, is there somebody in there? Because, like a Mags will say something along the lines of like, my goal is to trans as many characters as I can. Okay, good for you. Keep in mind, Mags is riling you up when when they say that. But she's not indicative of comics as a whole. The majority of people there are just low paid, and it just doesn't matter. They're playing with somebody else's toys. They're making Starbucks barista wages for playing with those toys, and you get what you pay for. Anyway, I know. They're like, but Perch, what about the person that had the Ukrainian flag in their Blue Sky bio? I mean, sure. Be mad at them all you want, but take heart that you probably make more. And, when you're in your late 30s, you're not going to be doing a GoFundMe for dental care because teeth are falling out of your mouth. You're not going to, you're not going to reach superstar heights of writing and then, you know, piss in an executive's party in front of everyone. So many pictures of that dick. Anyway, that's my theory. Feel free to hate it. Thanks for listening.